Welcome to episode 228, What the Top Athletes in the Game Do Differently, with Jesse Wright. Welcome to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist and performance coach. And here on the show, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper, commit to greatness, and develop a stronger mindset. You'll hear stories from those who are living life on their terms, and you'll receive strategies that will help you level up. So the question is, are you ready to be your own 1%? Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. Today, I get to connect with a man named Jesse Wright, who I had the privilege of connecting with recently through a mutual friend and client through Instagram. And I looked him up. I saw what he did. I said, I firmly believe that we are going to have a very, very good conversation all around mindset, emotional intelligence, handling pressure, and really just, living life on your terms, which is, what Be That 1% really signifies. And so I reached out to him. We had a really good, productive 15-minute call. And I was like, you got to come on the show. And he's like, I'm down. Let's do it. So for those of you who don't know Jesse, he is a high performance consultant. He's an Amazon best-selling author, and he is a former NBA, NFL, and NCAA performance professional. Which I'm sure he'll go into depth when he gives his background. But without further ado, Jesse, welcome to the show, brother.
James, thank you so much for having me on. I love everything you're doing. I love the concept of the 1%, dug into your website and some of the episodes on the pod and all that stuff. So you have an incredible message that you're giving out, and I welcome the chance to be a part of it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah. So let's jump right into some rapid fire questions so people can get to know you. First question is, where were you born and raised?
Easton, Pennsylvania. Easton's two greatest exports are Crayola crayons and Larry Holmes, former heavyweight champion.
Beautiful. Yeah. Two contrasts. I like it. What is a
That's
philosophy
right.
that you live by?
Very strong loyalty, without a doubt. I think people that you work for and that you establish strong relationships with, I think it's incredibly important to stay loyal to the people that have earned it. Yeah.
I like that. What is your definition of failure?
Oh, great question. Certainly probably textbook, right? Not achieving a desired outcome. But also can't dismiss the fact that that there should be a lesson involved too, and that if you don't achieve that desired outcome, that you also look at it as a chance to learn and grow and move closer to achieving that desired outcome the next time.
Mm-hmm. There it is. What do you want to see more of in this world?
Oh, I go empathy.
Yeah.
Again, it's probably a good lead in, maybe bury the lead a little bit for the conversation here, but I think that's such a powerful skill, I would call it, emotion, attribute, whatever it is. I think when people are conscious and mindful about others, right, and others' feelings and everything, I think good things happen.
I agree. What's a game-changing book that you've read recently or in the past?
My common answer to this is Mindset by Carol Dweck. When you use the word game changing, it altered my approach first and foremost as a practitioner, for sure, as a coach and as a professional in high performance and everything, but more importantly, as a parent. Just the practical strategies and how you alter your language and how that influences how a child can develop and their own perceptions of their own ability to succeed in life and everything like that. Like nothing short of game changing for me.
Amazing. What is a solid piece of advice that you have received recently or in the past that has served you well?
Yeah, I'll go to the past, my college years. My very first job in elite level sports was as a student equipment manager. And a good friend of mine to this day pulled me aside as I'm trying to get my head around the chaotic and confusing and challenging world of, high performance sport and some of the nuances and differences in that world that I was never used to or anything. He said, just keep your mouth shut and do your job. And it's so simple, and it was so kind of like Captain Obvious, but that has served me very well, to just put your head down, understand the role that you're being asked to play. Throughout the years, as you earn leadership jobs and everything, you certainly have to maybe kind of turn your head to that and speak up when necessary and stand in front of a room and lead. But many, many times over the course of my career, just taking that advice has been very helpful.
Cool. Last one. What did you have to give up or sacrifice in order to get to where you are today?
A lot of, let's talk about like the NBA schedule, right? And my career for 14 years in the NBA. Unbelievable opportunity to train athletes and to work directly with athletes at a the highest level of basketball and one of the highest levels of sports in the world. But the travel schedule and the density of games and all that stuff, it takes you away from family. It takes you away from events, some Saturdays and evening activities that, most, 9 to 5 or even normal type jobs that don't involve that travel wouldn't have to miss. So for many, many years, there were definitely events that I was leaving behind. The career versus maybe some of the personal, and that schedule, kind of, you were a prisoner to that schedule for a lot of years.
Yeah.
So as I've transitioned to this new kind of consultant type role where I don't have that type of schedule anymore, that's become very obvious that I knew I was missing stuff for 14 years, but I didn't really know what I was missing until I didn't have to miss it for a couple straight months.
Right.
So
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say that was a big sacrifice for a lot of years, both to family and friends. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank you for that. Let's kind of transition now into, your upbringing and catch us up, with a brief update on how you got to this high performance realm. What called you to it?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into this profession?
Yeah, so it probably starts off like many that end up working in sports, competitive athlete as a kid and through high school. I was the undersized high school football player that just, I wanted to get big and I wanted to get strong to be able to compete and contribute to the team. But I was small, so I joined a powerlifting team in the off season. And that was my first exposure to like structured, well planned out strength training. We trained with a local deadlift masters champion, and he wrote programs for us and exposed us to my first exposure to high level nutrition and all that stuff. And it was a world where I'm like, this is really interesting. I like it. It pairs right with my passion and love for sports. Like, I kind of want to go into this world somewhere. And I sought out, programs that had, degrees in kinesiology or exercise science or something. And I landed at Temple University and had kind of a dual undergrad where you had, you ended your 4-year degree with an exercise science bachelor's, but also took all the prerequisites to apply to a graduate school in physical therapy. And that was my intent and my pathway for a lot of years. But I was able to, as I mentioned, I worked for the football team and a little bit with basketball at Temple University. This goes back to the mid to late 90s. And I worked as a student equipment manager. I jokingly say this all the time. My very first job in sports was washing laundry and, cleaning up equipment and packing bags to go on roads and everything. But it was an incredible job because, once I made the decision to not play a sport in college, I thought I kind of left that world behind me, probably for my life. But I got a chance to work in sports, and it got a chance to show me and see just all of the roles and responsibilities that happen behind, a big time football program and a major Division I, and then, all the jobs that go into a Saturday game day or an athletic department. And that opened my mind to this strength and conditioning role and this strength and conditioning coach position. So I volunteered some time with the strength coach at Temple University, and that led to an undergraduate assistant strength coach role. and it made me shelf, or actually probably permanently shelf, my intention to go to physical therapy school, because the strength and conditioning area took off for me, both as an undergrad, and then my internship was with the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. And again, I'm dating myself, but Andy Reid, incredibly successful coach right now with the Chiefs, and Donovan McNabb was a high-profile rookie that year, so that was 1999.
Yeah.
So it was Andy Reid's first year as a head coach. He's obviously gone on to tremendous success since. And then after that season, they sent me over to NFL Europe. I was the head strength coach for one of those minor league teams for the NFL. It was a minor league for the NFL at that point in time. And I went over, I got a chance to work for the Barcelona Dragons. So I lived in Spain for 3 months for that season. And that was my first opportunity to be a head strength coach, which, brings about a whole new set of challenges that I had no clue was coming. At that point in time, I'm sticking my chest out, and I'm like, yeah, I know how to design programs, and I know how to train football players. Worked at a Division I university, worked for an NFL team. Had no clue what I was doing at that point in time, looking back at the skill set that was necessary to really succeed at that job at the ripe old age of 23 years old, right? So from there, I went to Hofstra University. I took on a head football strength coach role at Hofstra when they had football at the time. And that was a really cool experience too. Again, my second opportunity to be a head guy and all the responsibilities that comes with that leadership role. And then I took a little detour out of strength and conditioning for a year and worked for a sporting goods company. That exposed me as much as I didn't, as much as I wanted to be back in, working directly with teams and sports and everything, working at a startup.com at that point in time was incredibly valuable as I look back now at learning customer service and how to put together PowerPoint decks and some other stuff that came with working in an office environment. And then from there, I landed with a private sports training company, which was an incredible opportunity in a bunch of ways. The standard private sports training, we primarily train middle school through professional athletes, but the day-to-day was middle school and high school kids. But the owner was very well networked and an influential sports agent, and he had was able to earn and negotiate strength and conditioning contracts with two local, pretty high-level organizations. One of them was with St. Joseph's University, and the other was with the Philadelphia 76ers. So I served both of those contracts at different points in time as strength coaches and kind of overseeing the St. Joe's contract. And I got placed as the strength coach with the 76ers as a consultant through that company. And that's what exposed me. That's what kind of got my foot in the door with the NBA. So did that as a consultant for 4 years through that company. And then the team picked me up full time, and I spent 10 more years with the team in two different roles, both as a head strength coach and then as in a role titled director of performance science.
Nice.
And again, very interesting. There was a ton of change and transition throughout that time, and again, the learning opportunities and the education that you got from working for 5 different head coaches, 8 different general managers, and a high performance department with some really great practitioners and really good people and coaches. And then of course, everything that you learn from dealing with those types of players and all that stuff. I mean, invaluable in terms of growth and development.
So with your time there, I can't imagine the richness of the information that you were learning on a daily basis. I want to highlight your interactions with what the NBA would deem as a high caliber athlete, right? I mean, any person that's making at the professional level is considered an elite, right? But then within the elites, there's the elite of the elites. So I'm speaking more to the one percenters, not only to just stay on brand, but because I'm just genuinely curious at that level, what is the separating factor mentally between someone who can go to the professional, but then excel to even the top of the professionals, right? Like, what if you were to boil down to maybe 1 or 3 character traits or mental ways of thinking that you noticed from your own perspective? What would you say are some of those things?
Yeah, I've actually reflected about this a lot, and I think my answer would have been different years ago. but in giving it some real thought and kind of, quiet moments and writing down some notes and everything of the stuff that I had the fortunate opportunity to observe and actually discuss with people. One word, and we can dig into this a little bit more, but one word is consistency, right? The ability to sustain efforts over time. And I'll apply that first. When you talk about the one percenters, I think you should first recognize that anybody that's in the NBA is already less than a one percenter, right? With respect to their ability to play that game, their genetic athleticism, what they inherited, their size, their length, like they were born to be NBA players for sure. Right. So that should be the first thing, but it doesn't mean you have to make it there. Right. That's when you get into like your habits and, your commitment to growing the game and your commitment to building character and everything that comes with team sports and being a great teammate and working your way through whatever that process would be to be discovered to reach that level. Right. And it starts with AAU and playing at a high level in high school and getting, collegiate opportunities and then getting noticed and continuing a successful path there. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But it starts with, again, their God-given, their inherited characteristics, because, if hard work only is what got people to the NBA, like, you and I would be playing ball at 7:00 at night. Right. And so there's a lot more to it than that. Right. So that just park that for a second, but then we go to this consistency and now let's separate out the 1% of the less than 1%, right? And the ones you're talking about, the really high level achievers. This isn't new. This isn't just coming from me, but the structured routine is a defining characteristic that I personally was able to see, and anybody that works at that level would see at the really special athletes. That particularly with the NBA, it's really interesting because you can't really, it's not like the NFL where you have this like structured week every single week where you kind of know what Monday is going to be. The only time you really deviate from that, the only time you really deviate from that 7-day schedule is if you play on a Thursday or a Monday, right? Other than that, if you have a Sunday game, like Monday looks the same, Tuesday looks the same, Wednesday looks, for the most part. Well, the NBA is not like that, right? Every week's different depending on when your games were scheduled, whether you're on the road or not. You could have 5 games in a 7-day span. That's, not hugely common, but that happens 2 or 3 times in a year. Or you might have 2 or 3, and they occur at different days throughout the week. They occur at different times. You might play at 1, you might play at 9:00, go out on the West Coast, right? It's 7:00 local, but it's 10:00 back home. All of that. There's just constant flux and chaos. So the athlete that is able to seek out, find, develop, and sustain a successful routine within that chaos for a long period of time, not just a fleeting 2 or 3 weeks when you're really motivated or someone crawls in and chews your ass a little bit and says you need a better routine or so, you know what I mean? Like, it's like these guys have adopted, probably through some trial and error that maybe I didn't even see, particularly if we inherited a free agent or somebody that spent some time at another team first, or talking to veterans, right? If it's a rookie, or a younger guy that hasn't yet developed his routine, leaning on the experience of older players that have, or that provide some counsel on how to go about it and what might work for them. But through all that trial and error, you develop a set routine that you can lean on and find comfort in, and repeat that over and over and over. That leads to that, 1%, because there's a lot that goes into being a successful elite level professional athlete, right? One of it is your world, right? This mental skills component, right? Can you perform when the lights are on, despite all of the distractions and all of the chaos that I just mentioned, travel and media and, staff like me clawing at you to get a workout in, and other coaches crawling at you to watch some film to study your opponent that night. And then all of a sudden, public relations is grabbing you for an interview, and then community relations is grabbing you because you have a community event set up for Thursday and you got to autograph, 50 basketballs. And it's meanwhile, you got to maintain your brand on Twitter, and you got people peppering you with insults and everything like that, and social media. All of that happens all the time. So can you find a successful routine? Some do that, but can you sustain that successful routine over and over and over, despite all of those other challenges. Yeah.
I think thank you for being so descriptive, because that really put me in the world of an athlete like that. And one can only do that if you were in it. And it clearly sounds like you've been there and helped them through those things, or at least noticed those things. What led to that consistency, right? So if I'm an athlete and I recognize that, I know that my schedule is going to be chaotic, and I know that there's certain things that are going to help me become better mentally, be in a right state of mind to go out there and play at my best. I know that. What skills, what ways of being, what do they talk about in conversations that help them remain consistent, even in spite of all those distractions?
It's a good question. I don't know if you could, bucket a set group or bullets of criteria that would lead to that. I think probably for some of them, it might be an aha moment at some point in their career. There's no shortage of people telling them that they should develop a routine, without a doubt, right? Me being one of them. My years as a strength coach, we drafted, you got the NBA draft coming up in about a month's time, right? I'm sorry, 2 months time. But the combine's coming up in 3 weeks or so. From that point in time, and probably even in their college years, people are in their ears going, let's develop some consistency. Let's look at game day. Let's look at a game day schedule, right? You're going to have some form of a shoot around, and then we got to play at 7:00 at night, right? Those are two givens. Well, what does the rest of that day look like to prepare you for that game? What time do you wake up? Your meal timing. Now you get to your registered dietitians, and they're going, okay, we should probably set up a game day fueling routine, right? So what's that going to look like? And then you go to, in the college world, academics, you can't blow off class that day, right? So let's set up a successful routine in and around class, and making sure you still acknowledge the study and the student part of your career here right now. And then you go to the game, right? And what time do you arrive at the arena for a 7:00 game? And I say all of that because there are numbers, multiples of people surrounding a potentially successful potential pro athlete that's telling them the need and the importance of developing a routine. So then you go in, let's fast forward to maybe their arrival in the NBA, and you're aware of that, but you're probably unaware of all the challenges and obstacles that get in the way of establishing it. There's definitely some time management involved, because you no longer have class, right? And on some days, right, you're only required, if it's a practice day, you might only have 2 to 3 hours where you actually have to be doing something for the team, maybe 4, right? Depending on the day and the length of practice and everything. So what do you do with the rest of that time, right? And I would say that trial and error, without a doubt, to answer your question. I think guys will experiment with different routines. The good teams have veteran leadership in the locker room. You can certainly have coaches, both basketball and skill coaches and strength and conditioning coaches, which was my role for a lot of time, the athletic trainers, front office people. There are player development resources that kind of address the life skills component and everything. And then you have the Players Association coming in, and they're trying to help people grow and understand what it takes to be a successful professional athlete. All of those people can give them insight as the types of routines and maybe some of the things that people want to consider. So you're taking all of that in, and you're like, okay, well, let me pick from this, let me pluck from this, and I'm going to try this on a game day. And then when we go on the road, by the way, the East Coast teams are going to go out west for like a week to 10 days, if not 2 weeks long, to play like 4 to 6 games on the West Coast. So that interrupts the routine. So what does your road routine look like when the temptations of being out late, right? And you go to Los Angeles, right? And the lure of going out and and taking advantage of this celebrity status and everything is there. So how does that factor into your routine? Because you need to be able to succeed and play well. So I'm still kind of hitting on a lot of the same things, but I think where I'm going is, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, what you're making, so as my mind is listening to you, some things are popping up. And would you say how relevant or how prominent is obsession in these types of athletes? Like, is their level of obsession over the game not out of control, but like at a ridiculously high level?
For some, yes. I could not tell you it's all 450 of them, right? Or, a little bit more with two-way players now. Some are not obsessed with it. Some very much are, right? Right down to the amount of jump shots that a player wants to get on a game day, the morning of a game before and after shoot around. Like, I know some players, you have watched some players that will absolutely shoot a set number of 3-pointers, or even better, make a certain number of 3-pointers every single game day morning. Every single one, right? And that's what psychologically prepares them, right? Now let's go back to your last question. At some point in time, they attached success to shooting or making that amount of 3-pointers, right? Again, let's talk about game day fueling, right? Some guys like got their last big meal in the hotel on the road at like 3:00 before a 4:15 bus to head to the arena. And at some point in time, that enabled that athlete to feel good. They felt like they had the fueling to play well. And maybe psychologically, they really performed well that night. Maybe they had good numbers or stats. It ended up being a big win for them, right? It ended up being kind of a breakout game for them. So they attached psychologically the success to that time of their salmon and brown rice and vegetable meal in the hotel, right, at 3:00 in the afternoon. So that's what time I eat my last large meal before the bus to go to the arena for a 7:30 game, for a 7:00 game, right? So that's where the trial and error comes in. And I think a lot of times as you try things, and it maybe again, let's talk another nutrition, pregame caffeine, right? A lot of guys lean on caffeine as a stimulant, right? As a supplement, performance enhancing supplement. Could be gum. A lot of our guys chew gum. Some guys will drink coffee, right? There's a bunch of vehicles to deliver that, but what time do you take that, right? And that might come from some advice from someone like me or a registered dietitian for the team. It's like, hey, we favor this. We think it's going to be helpful, but let's make sure we optimize the timing because we don't want to compromise your sleep at night either, right? Let's not take down 200 milligrams of caffeine 6:30, even though it might help you for the game. It's going to keep you up till 3 or 4 in the morning, right? Because of our half-life of caffeine, right? So there's another routine thing. There's thousands of them we can talk about, but I think my big answer, going back to your question, is advice from others first. What should you consider as part of your routine? And then trial and error, that might lead to success and what actually works for the individual. And I would think you have 450 different game day routines in the NBA, without a doubt, when you pluck them apart. Yeah.
I like the two pillars there, the advice from others, which I think is vitally important for remaining open to information that you don't have because you don't know what you don't know. Right. And then the trial and error piece puts you in charge and ownership over what works for you. Like, it's your job to differentiate what's helpful and what's not. Like, you have all this information and now what is the best way to utilize it? And so it's cool that those are the two things I like. I really like that from a
it makes sense.
1-2 punch.
Makes sense.
So with that, energy management and recovery, and now, like, I know that athleticism and sport has been like a predominant thing in how you've coached and in the environments that you've been in. Relating that to business, right, and a CEO or an executive or an entrepreneur, I think a game, you have a set amount of rules, a set amount of time, and in a certain place. And you could train for those logistics. In life, there is no finish line. There is no end time. And so one has to be even more effective at time management and also know how to pace themselves to find their own speed, right? What have you learned from the athletes and recovery techniques that you learned in sport that you have exchanged into personal life, whether it be a parent or just running your own business now?
Yeah, another great question. I like the term balance, right? And, kind of a double-edged term. Like some people say, if you don't have balance, you're not going hard enough at any one initiative or objective or anything. I don't necessarily agree with that. I've seen people very successfully, again, like let's talk athletes, where their world is generally chaos and wired and sympathetic. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of health professionals that are going, hey, we need proactive attempts at recovery to drive parasympathetic tone, right? So let's work on mindfulness. Let's work on recovery breathing. Let's work on all the different 1% recovery modalities. Let's get some pneumatic compression in. Let's, headspace, and let's talk about, cold water immersion and all these things where we know you're good at the sweating part. It's what you've been doing your whole life, right? The stuff that makes you sweat and the stuff that we would define as injury risk reduction and performance enhancement and everything. But now let's talk about the other side to provide real balance, to give you a chance to have real sustainability and success within the environment. So you take that model and you say, okay, if the definition of an entrepreneur or a CEO or just a business leader or even an employee is that same kind of definition of work, but just in a different way. It's not going out and playing basketball or putting time into a weight room or, repeat sprints in a court to, train your anaerobic cardiovascular system or anything like that. But it's pounding away and making sure you're diligent at returning emails, right? And when you're assigned a project, make sure your timeliness, right? And you have, really good goals and objectives to complete it on a very high level. And how does that contribute to the larger team goals and objectives? And maybe you have a sales role, right? And you have very hard objectives, right, relative to sales goals per quarter, or something like that. And you're aware of all of that. There's a good feedback system of, successes and losses, and if you are attaining the goals that your boss or your company is looking for you to do, and that's your definition of work. But also know that I think again, let's talk about sustainability and long-term success. I think a lot of people can grind short-term, right? That's a fashionable and vogue word, grind. Like grind, I'm going to stay up, I'm going to sleep 4 hours a night, and I'm going to, make sure that I'm the hardest worker, and everybody knows I'm in the building at 5 a.m. and I don't leave until 11 o'clock at night, and all that. And I think most people are capable, if they really want to do that, short term. But it's unsustainable. And I think both research and experience will tell you it's not a long-term successful strategy. So to me, that leads you to this world of let's just create the sustainable habits, which means hard work and some type of proactive attempt to build in that other side, the recovery, the time off, the time away from work, that you build in the opportunity. Obviously, sleep trumps everything with respect to performance and recovery and regeneration and everything like that, that you're not this person that's wired and like less sleep is better, more time working is better, but you do, set up a strong sleep hygiene system and sleep opportunity each and every night. That you investigate, again, let's go trial and error, right? That you do look into some of the stress reduction techniques that are out there, again, whether you're talking, meditation or, morning reflections and journaling or, mindfulness training or anything else that's out there, or you go into sensory deprivation, or, you do like the cold tubs and recovery breathing that's kind of, fashionable even in the business world now for like CEOs and all that stuff. Like all of that stuff's great, and you experiment with it, but it all falls under the heading of, like, again, let's talk parasympathetic. If sympathetic is fight or flight, right? Parasympathetic is rest and digest. And that is a critical piece to balance out the hard work part of it. Mm-hmm. And that you truly believe and you embrace and you internalize that I need both sides of those to have real impact over the long term.
Yeah. What has been one of your favorite recovery sustainable habits that has had the highest ROI for you?
Mindfulness,
Mm.
I take again, like I won't tell you I do it every day, but I know when I'm stressed and when I'm wired. I actually, mindfulness for sure. Mindfulness meditation for at least a 6 minute block. I'm not a person that can spend hours doing it, but I know if I get a 6 to 12 to 18-minute block, that can reset me. And I do that often enough. I can't say I do it every day, but I do it
Hmm.
often enough for what I've found works for me. um, and then the good old fashioned sweat session. You know what I mean? Throw around some weights, max pull ups, right? Make sure that, exercise and all that comes from that too. That I never go more than, try not to go more than 2 days without some type of sweating session or some type of body work or movement or anything like that. Again, sometimes it could take the form of going out for a walk or
Hmm.
walking the dog or something like that. Or it could be real intense interval work, where you're actually throwing some music on and dripping sweat and, you hop on a bike and get your repeat sprint intervals. And, it takes all different forms. But
Yeah.
for me, I need both of those. Yeah.
What do you use as your non-negotiables, or do you have non-negotiables when it comes to decision making? Like, let's say you're presented with a business opportunity, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, should I say
Yep.
yes or should I say no? Like, embedded in your decisions and in your pursuit of something, do you have
Mm-hmm.
specific non-negotiables set in place that help you, one, do that thing more efficiently, and two, maybe enjoy or have more fulfillment throughout the process of doing whatever that decision is?
Yeah, I think it's rooted in what it is you just said. I would look at the project, and at this point in time, with a little bit of a luxury, although it's not a huge luxury, the ability to kind of select which projects I might take on, that there would be some level of enjoyment, that when that alarm goes off in the morning, that I do wake up and like I'm kind of excited
Mm,
on some even minor level to dig in on the next piece to completion of that project. That's sort of my non-negotiable, which I probably wouldn't have had even 5 years
yeah.
ago, 10 years ago, something like that you would have just gone after whatever was thrown at you at work, in a work environment or anything. But at this point in time, again, this kind of consultancy and everything, something that I have a chance to succeed at, and I know that a big part of that would be something that I enjoy doing. That it's
Mm,
not this like, you don't wake up with this weight where it's like, oh God, I got to work on this thing again today.
right.
And that wouldn't, to me, that's not, something that at this stage of my life that I would want to take on.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
mentioned offline that you coach coaches, and you're really stepping into that role of building future leaders and helping them coach more effectively. What have you noticed in these coaching sessions with other coaches uh, that they're not as skilled at, that you're helping them be more skilled at? Like, what characteristics are fundamental for any type of coach, regardless if it's sport, business, finance, you name it? If you're a coach, you need to have these skills.
Yeah. So it's probably a product of maybe the shingle that I have out front, between social media and the brands that I'm slowly developing, Balance the Bar, the book that I put out and everything. Um, I certainly could be a voice in helping, my target market, the one that I know best, right, is high performance sport professionals, right? Serving as a strength and conditioning coach for over 2 decades, then moving into this performance science role, a little bit of wearable technology, sports science, oversaw nutrition, everything, but working arm in arm alongside of dietitians and physical therapists and athletic trainers and development coaches and sport coaches and everything, can speak that language. So that's generally who I'm speaking with, when I do have these types of, coaching and counsel type sessions. So with that, I certainly could be a voice for the technical side of it. Let's talk about how to improve linear speed, or let's talk about how to, you know, analyze a data set or something like that. But I've always said, and I don't mind saying this even publicly, those have never been. There are much smarter people in the world, right? That have, brands crafted for that and everything. That I would refer those people to for a better opportunity to learn. right? I know what I know, but in general, I've always been a generalist. So depth on any one topic, probably better served maybe going to a friend of mine, right? And just bounce them over to that or anything. Where I think I again, let's go to the brand and let's go to kind of what I'm passionate about talking about, to piggyback on my last answer, is interpersonal skills, soft skills, that throughout my career in high performance sport, young practitioners in general, um, are built and wired and really motivated to get stronger relative to technical knowledge, degrees, advanced degrees, tons of certifications, and the opportunity to put letters behind your name and everything. There's so many great resources for that, and even more now that we live in an online continuing education world. And those are unbelievable. It's always the foundation of a strong practitioner anywhere. But again, the world I know is sports. But what are you doing to build the human being, the person that you are? Because that's the of the grand formula, all of the ingredients that go into being a successful long-term practitioner, coach, therapist, educator, leader. That interpersonal side really matters, and that in the grand plan of how you develop yourself and how you grow as a professional, that you are acknowledging that and you seek out ways to grow those skills, right? They very much are skills, because I don't think any of them are some of them come naturally, but all of them can be developed, right? If you happen to be deficient or it's an area that you've identified you need to work on. So to answer your question directly, when I do have conversations, that's generally the area that I kind of move people towards, because that's what I'm most passionate about talking about. It's the area that I believe I can have the best impact in helping people grow. And again, it's probably what people might even, text me or call me up for, I think.
Well, when you're talking about culture, Google did this study in one of their inside their company in 2012 called Project Aristotle, and they studied some of the top teams, both in sales, marketing, finance, teams from 2 employees to 150. And it's fascinating. They hired some of the world's best sociologists and psychologists. If you have a time, I suggest that you look it up. It's really, really nice. And they studied, they studied the top teams there, and the 5 things that became apparent that were patterns that all these teams possessed were 5 key elements. Number 1, and most important, was psychological safety. How comfortable do you feel in the environment that you're in, to the point where you can be okay saying, I don't get it, or I need help, or here's where I'm at, or I'm afraid of this. And the teams that were able to have those types of conversations and have the depth and the meaning that comes from those types of conversations were able to thrive. And so going to your answer of interpersonal skills, soft skills, that is what helps bridge that psychological safety, that unifies teams, that strengthens cultures, that allows the heartbeat to synchronize within that team, that helps them withstand challenge, that helps them maintain a certain level of thinking and being, because everyone is aware of where everyone's at. Right. And if one thing's off, everyone's sensitive to it and they can address it quickly so that the problem gets solved, as opposed to all these egos in one room, all in their own silos, being so disconnected that they go off and go out and it shows on the court. Right. So I just wanted to validate what you were saying about importance of those things. I don't think it gets talked about enough. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, because I think more coaches need to be aware of the impact that interpersonal skills or soft skills has on their ability to coach, but also on the team's ability to perform.
Yeah, so many great follow-ups. I wrote down a couple words here as you were describing that, and you just hit on one of them. It starts with awareness.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in quiet moments, I hope most of us, certainly people that reach a high level in their profession, are able to look at their strengths and weaknesses, right? Maybe, have a pretty good feel of what they're good at, and, maybe a better feel of what they're not good at. But then are you willing to voice those, right? And are you willing to take that data, right, and actually, make it actionable, right? And definitely put yourself in an environment, or maybe within a team setting, that you are placed in an environment to take advantage of your strengths. Hopefully that, right? Because that makes everybody feel better, gives you psychological safety, confidence, and I'm valued here, right? Because I can do what I'm good at. But then are you vulnerable enough to voice those weaknesses, right? To go after what it is you have identified is a weak point of yours, or an area that needs to grow, and actually, step up and raise your hand and go, hey, I need help here, right? And sometimes maybe that is taking the time to, take a continuing ed course or something like that, right? On data analysis or something like that, or data visualization. I bring those up because I'm doing that myself right now. Like, just little things that I know, like years ago I wanted to be better at. Now I have the time to do it. So it's hard. It's one thing to know, but then it's another thing, particularly in a team environment, a group setting, to step up and raise your hand and go and be vulnerable enough to tell people and to say, hey, I know I'm not good at this, right? And that might be bringing the team down a little bit. So if I'm asked to do this, I want everybody to know that I'm working on it. Right. And that's difficult. That's difficult to do. That term vulnerability is not I won't say it's uncommon, but not everybody has that. Maybe because they don't have the psychological safety like you talked about. There's a risk. There's a risk involved if I raise my hand. Yeah.
Yeah. And in elite level competitions, it's a lot about status and not revealing weaknesses. Yeah, I think one of the reasons that athletes can view vulnerability as a weakness is that you're almost trained in these elite environments to not show any vulnerable. You're not trained to show it. Like, you have to have this strong front to intimidate your competitor or the person that you're going up against. And so I think it could be a natural thing to not talk about those things. One, because it's not socially acceptable at maybe the level that it should be. And then we're just using men, and in this example is in the NBA, men attached to that societal pressure have a harder time accepting that vulnerability than, let's say, women do on average. And then you have maybe leaders or coaches who don't understand that emotional intelligence side, who aren't creating the spaces for those conversations to happen. So you just have compound on compound on compound that don't really give opportunity to open up and talk about things. So I think all those play a factor, but I would agree, or I would state that a team that does have the courage to view vulnerability not as a weakness, but as an opportunity to learn areas for growth and for maximizing their already built skill set can only enhance a team. And I don't see any downfalls of having those kind of conversations regularly.
No, and I think if you go to Family Feud, survey 100 people, or 100 CEOs, or 100 executives of successful businesses or successful team environments or anything, I think the great majority would echo exactly what you just said. That if we could have that wired into our culture, and everybody was willing to acknowledge their strengths and weaknesses, and willing to grow what it is we need to develop, both individually and relative to team goals, gosh, what could stop that team for sure?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another study was one done out of Berkeley, where they did the study of touch. I don't know if you've heard of this one, and they studied the NBA teams. So over the course of a season, the researchers identified how many times each team touched one another.
Okay. Right.
And the amount
led to high fives and
high fives, fist bumps, all that.
Yep.
And the teams that touched the most had higher winning percentages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would even dare to say that those who touched the most had more psychological safety in their cultures, which led to more of the touching, which led to the release of oxytocin, which is a hormone that bonds people together, deep loyalty, deep trust, deep respect, that then opens up even more conversation about feedback exchange. Here's what you're doing right. Here's what you're doing wrong. Got it. I'm not going to take that personal. You care enough about me to tell me that. I can now execute on that feedback and now get better. Our team gets better and we just keep rolling. So it's just funny how it all kind of fits together.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, if you could give me your thoughts. So I didn't read that. Now that you talk about it, I do remember people discussing that.
Yeah.
But I didn't read the study myself. Did they look at the leaders of those teams, either head coach or even maybe the high profile players, the big money guys, or the top performers? And the reason I asked that, and it's actually my question to you, does that type of culture need to be top down? Right? Does psychological safety come from people seeing that the leader is wired that way? The leader is willing to touch and high five, and he's an energy guy, and visual vocal rewards anytime something's good, and probably equally as engaging anytime there's a growth point and a growth opportunity. Or if your leader is not like that, do you think it's possible to have a bottom up where maybe the locker room or the culture below the leader can grow that culture? Like, what are your thoughts?
Cool. Thank you for that question. One, I'll start with the groundswell. I think it's possible, highly unlikely. Okay. Because at that level, I think the leader of the team has so much influence. And I just speaking from personal experience of just working with so many different teams and many different energies, not just sport, but in business, and observing how, I don't know if it's fear, resistance, nervousness, whatever it is that prevents the group from approaching the leader. But whatever that is, and there's many things, those conversations don't get had. So it helps to have a leader who's courageous enough to embody that first, because that's what gets everyone to buy in, or at least most people to buy in. So you have, a tipping point. From a coach's perspective, like let's say the coaches aren't like that, but the leader of the team is, like the athlete, the leader of the team is. I do think that leader and that team can get the coach to buy into that culture if the team is tight enough. So it can work in a groundswell from that vantage point. And it also can go a step further if the coach and the players are on the same team, but the GM and the ownership is not. I do still think that you could have a groundswell upwards, but I don't think you can have it from an athlete to a leader. I think it's less likely there than it is in any of the other scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think more so than anything, I would think if you tried to attach a fingerprint or a set of qualities or criteria or common characteristics of those high touch cultures, I would think that the leaders were high touch guys. A great majority of them, for sure. Because I think particularly in sports, like, people take the lead of the people that are in charge. And again, might not always be the head coach. It could be that second level of leadership, and it could be a very strong locker room culture. You hear about those a lot. Head coach can be who he is, but if it's player led and there's a really strong culture in the locker room of high touch or high character or a commitment to extra work before and after practice or whatever, like, teams will take the lead of a really strong veteran, right? It's helpful for that veteran to be the best player, right? But it's also helpful for that veteran to have really good habits, and even if he isn't the best player, but just someone that people tremendously respect, that they can influence those habits even if the coach doesn't have them.
Right, exactly. The touch thing too, I think, is like, if you just look at human dynamics, a touch is like, you don't touch someone unless you want to have a connection to them. You know what I mean? I think of like dating. You're not going to touch, for me, I'm not going to touch a woman's hand if I'm not trying to get closer to her or understand her at a deeper level or have empathy with her, right? So So there is a symbiotic relationship between connection and touch and the desire to want to improve that relationship. You don't see there would be no other reason to have so many touch points if that wasn't where it was coming from. If it wasn't sourced in a desire to want to improve. So if you're listening, having this a part of your culture, according to the science, could be another strategy to help bring people together, foster these deep, meaningful conversations, create even more psychological safety that allows for free circulation of information and direct feedback to be given to each individual so that they can grow to be better versions of themselves.
That's right. And when we're talking about touch, right, we throw out the disclaimer, right? Appropriate professional touch.
Appropriate,
right?
yes. Thank you.
No weirdos out there going around and setting themselves up for setting themselves up for harassment.
Yeah, we don't need no legal disputes here, right?
Nope, we don't want that kind. Yeah, just a fist bump.
Very
good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right. Fist bumps, high fives. Cool. As we're winding down here, what's any last minute tips or quotes or stories that you feel are relevant given what we've discussed so far in the episode that you think the viewer would or a listener would really find helpful?
Yeah, we touched on a couple different things. The self-awareness piece is super interesting. And again, surveys, and this is Harvard Business Review type stuff, and companies look for it. It's one of those top skills or characteristics that people would look for, that companies look for in future leadership, right? This ability to be very in tune with who you are as an individual. The interesting thing is when people hear that term, I think immediately they go to what we talked about already. Strengths and weaknesses, very aware of your strengths and weaknesses, like who you are as a human. But when you read into some of the literature behind it and everything, there's a really interesting second component that, again, you kind of know, but you don't really know until you think about it, that your strengths and weaknesses are automatically tied to those around you, right? Whether it's your family or your contacts, or your personal or your coworkers, your colleagues, your leadership, whatever, that they're always linked to the people you interact with all of the time. So not only, right, so self-awareness kind of has these two little divisions. Certainly your understanding of yourself, but how do others that are around you regularly also perceive those strengths and weaknesses? And how do those strengths and weaknesses fit in that world where you're consistently and regularly interacting with others? So if we're talking about a work environment, you can be very aware of your strengths and weaknesses, but what do your colleagues, what does the guy or girl sitting next to you think of those same strengths and weaknesses, and how they contribute to the bigger team goal, and how they may affect her directly or him directly? So that's a really interesting piece that sometimes people don't necessarily think of, that they're complementary. Your knowledge of yourself and people's perceptions of what you identified as strengths and weaknesses and everything, and how they fit with others. So to say, again, I didn't necessarily think of that until I'm doing research for the book and reading into more articles like this and everything. And it's yeah, you know what, that does make sense. Those are never, your own strengths and weaknesses are never independent. They're always tied to something else and some other individual you regularly deal with. Yeah. So there's an internal and an external is how they describe it.
Yeah. And it's cool to think about that, because then you look at, if you are in a specific strength and weakness format or frame currently, and you put yourself in a different environment, different skills are going to be coming out of you because of that new environment that could add additional skill on top of your already existing skill, or completely new skills that bring a whole new level of value and dynamic out of you that then allow you to be more effective at what you do, which brings us back to the importance of who you surround yourself with, or, your environment shapes your behavior, whether you like it or not. So choose wisely. Right. And so, so thank you for bringing that up. And I think that's a really good key and point. You do have a book. Tell us a little bit about that. And then also, where is the best place to connect with you and get involved with what you're doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. The book is called The Intent is to Grow. It's a novel. A business parable is probably the best kind of category you can group it as. So it's very much professional development information, all tied to the interpersonal skills that we talked a little bit about here, but it's written in a novel form. So, and it's in a high performance sport environment. So I reference a lot of the roles and responsibilities of a fictional Division I athletic department, and some of the qualities that someone, or some of the experiences or environments or rooms that people would encounter if you worked in a collegiate athletic department. But the great thing about soft skills and interpersonal skills is they cross over to every world, every industry. So even if you never worked in a sporting environment or anything, you could gain a lot from the discussion of the 6 attributes. And just the basic premise of the story is this young strength and conditioning coach earns a graduate assistantship opportunity at a fictional Division I university. And it's a university athletic department that recognized that interpersonal skills, soft skills, are critically important to teach and develop. So you go along with this young character, the protagonist, as he is sent on this really creative orientation week, where he's exposed to 6 different mentors that all teach him in different creative ways a different attribute to grow, what we call a true professional skill set, which is basically kind of I repackaged the same soft skills that everybody knows are important and everything. So, he sits in on a lecture at the university from a communications expert, right? And that attribute is called voice. But he begins to learn the nuances of communicating up to leadership and communicating down to athletes or people that work for you. And this concept of this model where you consider altering your communication strategy based on who you're talking to, who's receiving the message. And then he goes to an empathy and compassion expert, right? And that attribute is called soul. And he goes to the retired athletic director that built the athletic department, and he learns all about transformational leadership and a servant-based approach leadership and everything. And all the while the reader can place themselves in the situation of this young coach, and his only desire is to be a really good coach, and he's wired to want to grow his technical skill set. Meanwhile, he's like being forced to meet with all these mentors that are teaching him something that he never even knew he needed to learn. So that's kind of the message behind the book and everything. Yeah. So yeah, fun project. Took me 10 months to write, and it was challenging enough to write a book, having never written a novel before. But the marketing piece is super interesting and never goes away, which is what I was told from a lot of authors, and that's what you wake up kind of trying to find ways to keep it in front of people. So I'm thankful for podcast opportunities like this, right? With it's just a small opportunity to talk about it, and I thank you for that. Where people can find me on social media, I'm most active on Instagram. Jesse K. Wright is the account, JESSEK WRIGHT. Post regularly, stories and posts, active on direct message if anybody wanted to reach out that way. I have a website, balancethebar.com. You can buy the book through that website. It's a link to Amazon and has a lot of information about growing an interpersonal skill set. There's videos, there's infographics, and my main email, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's Jesse K. Wright. And if anybody wants to email me directly, you can reach me at admin@balancethebar.com.
Nice. Awesome. Yep. Jesse, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for your wisdom and your insight, and keep shining, man. Keep sharing your gifts and your knowledge with the world.